Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining what is day 4 of our 12 days of Facebook Live. I'd like to welcome the replay viewers. And today I am bringing Done is Better Than Perfect with my very, very dear friend and collaborator, Cheri Gregory. I want to say hi to everybody, Cheri.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm trying not to do it perfectly. We're trying to get this done, but not perfect, right?
Right, exactly. Like we can't be too perfect because then we totally blow the whole premise of this interview. And the reason that I brought Cheri on board is because I think I'm free to say that Cheri is an author, a speaker, and a recovering perfectionist.
100%, yes.
Would you like to say more about your journey with perfectionism?
It's so interesting. It's been about 6 years since I really made a hard break with perfectionism. Now, that doesn't mean that I left it completely in the past, but I really recognized the damage that perfectionism had in my life, and I really came to the conclusion. The rule I grew up with was nothing's worse than making mistakes. And so growing up and even in my 20s, it was like, oh, it would be better to do nothing than to make a mistake. But about 6 years ago, I realized that, oh, no. Nothing is worse than making mistakes. As in all the nothing that I have so carefully not done, that is way, way worse than making mistakes. And so that's actually kind of what we're here to talk about tonight is done is better than perfect. Doing something is so much better than living in the fear of doing it imperfectly. Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you're watching and this sounds like you or somebody you know, please share this broadcast because I think that there's not only a lot of truth in what we're about to share tonight, but I think there's a lot of freedom. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by talking about why I wanted to have this discussion because I have to tell you guys, Cheri has saved me and she's really saved all of you because I was going to do this one solo because I was held in that trap of waiting for perfect for several years. So I started blogging and speaking publicly in 2004. And in 2007, I had this idea that I was going to do a little bit more with it. And I made the mistake. Now, this is long before I knew about people should earn the right to speak into your life or to give you advice or anything like that. And so I made the mistake of asking a few people what they thought. And they were not very kind with their feedback, which is fine. They felt like they were being honest. I think they felt like they were protecting me. And so, I had this long list of things I had to do. And I remember one loop I was caught in is I had been told that if I wanted to ever write a nonfiction book, I had to first have a very large speaking platform because nonfiction deals were hard to get. But then I was told that I couldn't book nonfiction speaking if I didn't have a book to sell in the back of the room. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. And so I just sat back and I had great strategy. I had great plans. And I was like, okay, well, I have to do this. I have to do that. But I was stuck in this chicken and egg thing. Meanwhile, people are coming to me who knew that I had done writing, knew that I had done speaking, and they're asking me for advice. And I'm giving them this best advice too. And they're kind of going, yeah, well, I'm just going to do this thing. So I sat there for like 5 years, 6 years, watching people do things wrong, like not even do them imperfectly. They were doing them wrong. And then one day I woke up and I was like, but they're doing them. And thankfully, I woke up and had this realization. And as I look back, I can't get those years back. So to me, when you're so focused on perfect that you're not doing anything, that is a costly mistake. And I feel like, Cheri, that you have some great insight into that I would love for you to share with viewers.
Well, first of all, I love your story because I resonate with it. And, the whole idea of watching other people, but they're doing it wrong. They shouldn't be succeeding. It's so unfair. And, all that emphasis was on the wrong where we should have been putting our emphasis on, but they're doing things. The wrong part takes care of itself because if it had been totally wrong, they wouldn't have been getting results, right?
Right. Well, and the other thing is they were getting better in the doing.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's part of the cost, So for anybody who's watching who worries that, well, but don't you guys care about quality? Don't we care about excellence? Let's just get a few basic things out of the way. Why is it so important for those of us who really want to get things just right? There is a level where we care about excellence, and this conversation is not about lowering our standards. So, we'll make that clear. And we do care about our people. Okay. I want to make sure that that's clear as well. But here's where I think we get off track. And that is within a belief, and I'll just speak for myself, but I'm betting it's going to resonate. If I do everything right, nothing will go wrong, is kind of the belief that comes out of it. So if I do everything right, then and what that ends up being when we're working in business and when we're working in speaking and writing is, if I do everything right, I'm guaranteed success. Or if I do everything right, then I can't possibly fail. And so it ends up being really self-protective. And it ends up being that we're striving for perfection from this place of fear. And the simple truth is you can do everything right and it won't succeed. You can do everything right and it would still fail. I mean, that's just the way life is. And, rubbing shoulders with entrepreneurs who talk about things like, and I used to think this was crazy talk, right? Fail fast, fail often. I was like, no, fail never. I just do that plan. No, I want the no fail plan. And the truth is, the way we learn and grow is through failure. So, I've shared this story with you before, and so I'll hope not to bore you too badly, but I got the biggest epiphany when I started podcasting. And, I started podcasting after a major failure where I had done everything right. I had done a proposal we really thought that a publisher was going to love. And I mean, I have never had anything boomerang back so fast in my life. I mean, it was like truly a dismal, Amy Carroll calls it a dismal failure. And so because I couldn't get the message out in, a book form, Amy Carroll and I started a podcast, which I know you're familiar with, Grit and Grace. And the most amazing lesson came as I was editing the audio files, because I did that for the first years. And I used to believe that there were natural speakers who were just so good because they never made any mistakes. I mean, obviously that's why they hold us spellbound, right? Because right. I mean, from this philosophy, they must do everything perfectly, And so I was, and by the way, the story I'm about to tell about Kathy Lipp, she knows I tell it and I have her full permission. Just want to be clear on that. So I was editing one of our first episodes with Kathy, and during the interview, I just remember being completely engaged in what a wonderful interview it was, what a wonderful time I was having, how good I knew this was going to be for our listeners. And if you had asked me after that interview, did Kathy make any major mistakes? I would have said, no, Kathy doesn't make mistakes. She does it perfectly. That's why Kathy's Kathy. That's why everyone loves listening to Kathy, because she doesn't make mistakes. She does everything just right. Well, then I started editing and I was like, oh my goodness, she makes just as many, if not more mistakes as the rest of us. She makes as many mistakes as I do. And by mistakes, I mean false starts, saying the wrong word, having to stop and start over, that kind of thing. And I was like, well, if the difference isn't the number of mistakes made, then what's the difference? Why is it that someone like Kathy, and there's others like Michelle Cachat and Cheri Gregory, but Kathy is I think, my favorite illustration. And what I realized was she doesn't focus on the mistakes. The mistakes don't get in her way. She is so focused on serving her audience so that she doesn't, the issue isn't making mistakes. The issue is what we make of the mistakes. And that was just huge for me to realize that getting everything just right is not nearly as important as having that focus of serving our audience.
Oh, I think that's a really good point. Because I think that some people, think that serving their audience means they have to be perfect.
Oh, yeah, and I recognize that. I remember those days still.
So can you speak to that person, right? Because I think you talked a little bit about it with excellence, but like what I have found, and I'm not saying that people don't reach out to me and say, oh, Tonya, you said this word when you should have said that word, or this graphic is a little bit cut off. I get all of that stuff, but for the most part, I find that people are not keeping track or keeping score of my mistakes.
Mm.
If anything, I find that people are, you know, if they point out any mistake I make, it's from a genuine place of, just so you know, if there's anything you can do to fix it. It's not like a neener, neener, you're so unprofessional sort of intent behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, have you had the same
Oh,
experience?
absolutely. You know, the people I listen to are the ones who are like, I think I have permission. Are you open to hearing? You know, they're really gracious. And then it's often a message of, I thought you'd want to know. And very often I do. But, you know, the thing is, most of the time, these areas in which we haven't gotten everything just right, they aren't standing in the way of actually being effective. They aren't things that get in the way of serving people. And for the person, for example, who, you know, let's say you use an apostrophe wrong, or you end a sentence with a preposition and they can't stand it, that person isn't somebody we're going to be able to really serve anyways. And I've quit worrying about that, because what I want to work, the people I want to work with and serve are the people who are willing to wrestle through and listen and kind of look beyond maybe any surface imperfections, or as in the case of some of them, they're willing to participate and help me make something better. I mean, I love it when a blog reader emails me and says, hey, you got a misspelling, or you've got a wrong word or a missing word. I go in and fix it. Hey, great. Like, free proofreading. Thank you so much.
Right. So something we had talked about is, you know, one of the hidden costs of waiting for perfect is what you're not doing because you're waiting to do it right. And I know that you have asked this question of others. So what are some things that you find, maybe like some trends that people don't do in an effort to wait for things to be perfect?
You know, I asked that question actually on Facebook today, and it's so interesting, the number of big projects that are being put on hold until they can be done completely perfectly. You know, like one person said, starting a newsletter, and somebody else is working on a book proposal, or somebody else, you know, they're waiting to be able to even approach MOPS groups until they have like 3 messages completely ready to go. And it's like, oh my goodness, I mean, how long is that going to take? And part of the problem is it's just so intimidating to see that huge goal and to say the whole thing has to be perfect before any actual movement takes place. And it's kind of back to what you were saying. We end up in this chicken and the egg where it's like, oh, you know, I want it to be perfect, but I can't get started because it's so big. And so how am I going to make it? And you just end up chasing your tail. And and part of this is we are such idealists. You know, a lot of us, we can picture it, we can imagine it. And the trouble is, like you said, there is this cost, there is this this loss because of the time that's ticking away. Well, people you noticed they were just doing it. They were just doing it, and they were doing it wrong, but they were doing it, they were learning, and they were moving on. While you and I'm going to put myself in the same category, we were staying stuck, and all that we could do was stand there going, I haven't made a mistake yet. I haven't made a mistake yet. Well, goody gumdrops for us, because we hadn't done anything yet.
Well, and I love that you brought up MOPS groups, right? Because I've seen that too. Like, I have to have 3 messages before I can present a MOPS group. Meanwhile, as a former MOPS coordinator, like, I'm the first person to tell you, we're just so excited to have one person with one message that connects with our audience that'll actually show up as agreed upon. Like, we don't need to know all your topics. We just need to know that you have one that serves the audience. And I want to take an opportunity to just mention Jennifer Bryant of A Practical Family. She's watching right now. I know you know Jen. And who says, yes, serving the audience first is the hugest lesson that she's learned this year. And that the audience appreciates when we're imperfect. And I have to say, like, you know, the former journalist in me wants to say, well, that's not true. But it's so true. I find when I make mistakes, I have humanized myself. They not only are more forgiving, but I feel like I connect at a deeper level. Have you had that same experience?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the number of times where, and this was early on in my speaking, where I would make a mistake and I would do my best to recover from it on stage, and then I wouldn't sleep. Let's say it was a retreat weekend. So Friday night, I got no sleep, debated whether to apologize the next morning, figured it had ruined everything, only to have women coming to me the next morning telling me, you know, everything that had they had been learning and thinking and processing between And nobody mentioned my mistake at all. Or if they did, they were like, yeah, we knew you were one of us. That made you, when you got on stage, you looked so completely put together. And then we realized you were just like, and I'm like, oh, so nobody's ready to drive me off the property because I made a mistake? Whew, good.
Right. So something you had said about, this focus on mistakes, and the fact that, it's not really about making the mistake. You said this when you were using the example earlier. It's not about making the mistake. It's what you do with the mistake.
Yeah.
You had brought up two really good points when we were talking before the broadcast about, you said when we wait until something is perfect before we make some great reveal, we miss out on getting vital feedback along the way. And then you also said, and when we perfect something in isolation, it ends up being perfect only in our own heads.
My word.
And quite honestly, it might flop.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you share a little bit more about that? Because I think I know for me, if I were to sit and obsess over something and then feel it was perfect and then it flopped, that would just reinforce that I need to spend more time perfecting next time.
Oh my goodness.
I just didn't invest enough time.
No, yeah, no. And that's been such a learning thing for me to realize that, if we can take those larger projects and chunk them down. So let's take a MOPS message, for example, and I love what you said, if one person can show up with one message and be there. So, there was one time after I had a little more distance from perfectionism where I was working on a message and I asked permission of a MOPS leader. I said, look, I'll come with great content, but I want to try out a format I've never tried before. Could you run it past your committee and run it past your the women and make sure they're okay with being a little bit of a guinea pig? And what I did was I spoke, they did some discussion. I spoke again, they did some discussion. I spoke again, then they did some discussion. So rather than me do all the talking for 45 minutes and then one big discussion, it was interspersed. I'd never done that before. And so, it was a little awkward and my instructions weren't quite as clear as they could have been, but we all knew that Cheri was trying something new. And here's the thing, the topic I did it on, it totally worked. And the feedback I got was really, really good. They had great table conversations. They really liked the change of state, that they weren't sitting there trying to stay awake listening for 30 or 45 minutes. They liked hearing a little, discussing a little, hearing a little, discussing a little. And then on a little feedback form, they gave me some real specific input that I was able to use the next time that I did it. And so rather than me spending hours and hours at home trying to get the perfect format, I got it to that magical place called good enough, where I could explain it to the point that that the committee could say, yeah, well, we're willing to try that out. It sounds different. It sounds doable. It didn't sound like the wild, wild west. Didn't sound like anybody could get injured in the process, and I confessed that I had no idea how it turned out. And I told them, I said, if this turns out to be really, I don't think I used the term dismal failure, but if I said, if this really seems like a flop, please feel free to tell me. And, I'll never do anything like this again. But I ended up being able to make so much more progress, so much faster with that particular message because I tried it a lot earlier than I would have if I'd been trying to perfect it. And then I got all that live feedback from them. Plus, I saw what was happening and I was busy taking notes and learning things by seeing it happen. So it was great.
I love that example because I think it's both practical, but it's also, I think, incredibly relevant. I think that that's realistic and something that we're all going to experience in one time or another. Now, I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is I'd like to move into a practical tip for everybody. And so we're talking about hidden costs and we're talking about saving. And to me, there is the idea of spending and then there is the idea of investing.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like what you're saying is that rather than worrying about saving our good stuff or saving up till something big, that we can invest. Do you have anything that you could add to that? How somebody could make that mindset shift, but then also what are some investments people could make on their way to getting things? I mean, we both know it's never going to be perfect, but in a way to getting things where they feel good about what they're delivering.
Well, I think the key here is just like you said, stop saving everything up until that big moment. Start investing in your people, whoever those people might be. Take that big project, the big scary project, and cut it down into the smallest thing you could be doing. You know, one of the quickest examples I can use is we get all sorts of teaching about how we're supposed to have a newsletter, or how we're supposed to, the right way to send out your blog posts, or the right way and the right perfect timing to use your email list. You know, I've heard all sorts of rules, and because I wasn't following the rules, I did nothing with my email list. And then I finally started thinking to myself, okay, what's the most basic thing I can do with my email list? Do I have to wait till I have a full-on newsletter with multiple articles and photos and links and all that kind of stuff, which takes me a lot of time? Do I have to wait till I have a brand new blog post? And I'm like, these people have put themselves on my email list. They've said they want to hear from me. What if all I have time to do is send a quick email, like with one tip, with one piece of value? And I'm like, oh, but that's none of the big things that I've been trained to do. Right. And so, you know, the practical example I can give here is the day before Thanksgiving, I felt moved to reach out to my my email list and say, hey, you know, I think the title of the subject line was, in case you need to hear this today. And so I just gave them some encouragement for the next day, in case they were tired, in case they were feeling overwhelmed, in case some of the baking wasn't turning out. I just wanted them to hear some appreciation and somebody who believes in them and somebody encouraging them to rest. And that was it. There was no link. I wasn't selling them anything. I hadn't written a brand new blog post. I didn't spend a ton of time grammar checking. There might have been a grammar and or spelling error in it. I know. But I think I dashed it out in like 10 or 15 minutes. And it was like, and all I was thinking to myself was, what would I have wanted to hear? You know? And I almost didn't send it. I almost thought, this is dumb. This isn't this isn't good enough. This isn't just right. And I went ahead and hit send. And I got a couple of emails from people saying, thank you so much, Cheri. I really needed to hear that. And I was like, why don't I do this more often? It was so small. It wasn't part of a huge plan, but it made a difference. It was serving people on my email list. And it was just that very small thing that I was able to do rather than waiting.
I think that's a great example, especially because what I've seen, like at least even with me, like these Facebook Lives, this was something we talked about the other day, was Facebook Live really scares some people. And I know Jen, who's watching, was one of the people who said, yeah, I'm just terrified. And, you know, I was thinking the other day, I was like, you know, my website like just launched. And so right now it's really just a landing page, and I need to build out the content. And, you know, the right thing to do is I need to have 2,000 word long form content and blah, pillars and cornerstone. And I know all this. I work with clients. I tell them this stuff. But then I'm like, it's December. And it's Christmas, and school's going to get out. My husband's a teacher. And what can I do? Well, you know what? Facebook Live is something I'm very comfortable with. It's something I enjoy. I knew that I knew a lot of people in the author, speaker, entrepreneur realm who were interested in trying out Facebook Live, but maybe a little bit scared of doing it themselves. And so I thought, well, you know, I could do 12 Facebook Live broadcasts so much easier than I could sit down this month and plan and write one 2,000 word form of like long form pillar piece of content. And so that's what I set out to do. And then I was actually surprised the number of people who came out of the woodwork that said, I'd go live with you. I'd go live with you. And then I even found somebody, a brand photographer I know, who she only does IG Live. And I only do Facebook Live. And so she said, well, you know, if you'll come on my IG Live, I would love to be a guest on your Facebook Live to see how that feels.
Okay.
So I got to try something new. And trust me, I was totally terrified of IG Live. I don't know why. It's just like, oh, I had to turn my phone around. Suddenly that's like out of my comfort zone. But you know, and now so she's going to join me on Sunday, and it's going to be really cool because we're going to talk about brand photography. And I love it. Jen Bryant is willing to go live with me. We're going to totally hold her to that.
Yes.
Look at this. I'm putting it on the screen. So everybody who watches the replay.
And you've gone public.
Yeah. They're going to message me and they're going to say, so when's this Jen Bryant from A Practical Family going to go live? And I'm going to say, it's coming. It's coming. Probably not until 2019, but it's coming. So Cheri, I really appreciate that you have just given us so much insight today, and really, I feel like have been very honest with your experience and sort of the price you've paid from waiting to be perfect. Now,
Well,
I know. Go ahead.
Can I
Oh,
interrupt real
please
quick?
do.
I want to just point out to all of our viewers here that what you just illustrated is you choosing to be done rather than have things just right, because you're going to have these 12 videos that are going to live on your website, so they're going to be done rather than the just right version of that 2,000 word post, and you're going to have a lot of great content that's going to inspire you to write further blog posts and maybe get some guest posts. So this is just a beautiful example of you living the message of this particular Facebook Live. You also used, I think, a really important word about comfort zone. And I think that's what those of us who long to get things just right, it's a form of comfort. Yes. Because we're doing something scary. And if we can get it just right, it's going to feel good to us. And the problem is doing new things is always going to feel uncomfortable. That's why we keep waiting and waiting, and we keep waiting until it feels done enough so that we no longer feel afraid. And if we wait until we no longer feel afraid, until we feel comfortable, we're never ever going to do anything. And so I think part of the message here is to do it scared, like you're going to do with that IG Live. I think that's great.
Well, I think that's a great example, because when I was doing the IG Live, I mean, I was shaking. I had that adrenaline shake that you get, right? Yeah. And of course, I'm like, I do live in groups. I almost never go live on a page. So that's new to me anyway. But I'm like shaking. And the first time for this 12 days of Facebook Live, I was like ready a half hour and like making sure all the things work. And I've got my phone making sure. And then, today it's like I waltz in and hook up 6 minutes before we're supposed to start. Ooh. I'm like, well, if I see some comments pop up, I know I'm live, so I don't need to check my other device. I mean, there's definitely that comfort in your own skin. Yeah. And like you pointed out, I mean, I'm going to have 12 pieces of, I think, really solid content. Almost all of them are interviews. So that's something that, one of the things that I'm passionate about, right, is if I'm going to work with somebody, I want it to be mutually beneficial. So I want them to feel like it's content that they can share with people.
Absolutely.
And like at the end of the day, we get to say we did it.
Yay!
So that's something. So anything else you want to share with folks? I have your website up on the screen.
Oh, thank you. No, I would just say done is so much better than perfect. And so find that one small, and the other thing is it's cumulative, don't start by trying to just do a book, start with those small steps and get the snowball rolling. And what you just illustrated so beautifully is your comfort zone will increase, and the number of things that scare you will decrease, and you'll just get used to doing things scared and realizing that feeling of accomplishment feels really, really good, and it really mitigates the fear that drives perfectionism. So yeah, go out and do it.
So on that note, I'd like to encourage our viewers, whether you're watching live, you're watching on replay, to go ahead and comment with what is that one thing that you're just going to do rather than holding off for perfection. And I mean, it could be publish a post. It could be scheduling your Facebook content, or even making a little social media post. It doesn't have to be anything big, but I'd love to hear that. I'd love to cheer you on. And now I'd like to thank you, Cheri, for joining me. This was truly a treat. And thank you for helping us all appreciate that hidden cost of perfection.
Oh, thank you.